So just as we don't like to experience pain, whether it's physical or mental or emotional or spiritual, so others are exactly the same way. And if we can touch the depth with which we don't want pain and know that that is also the depth at which every other living being does not want pain, then that can help us generate a very strong determination never to deliberately or consciously inflict pain on someone else of whatever kind or to whatever degree. And that wish not to cause harm is what ethical conduct is based on. And that ethical conduct is what makes us trustworthy to other living beings. And when they trust us, then we can be of benefit when we have the knowledge, the wisdom, the skill, the compassion to really benefit others according to their own dispositions and interests and needs. And so let's generate that altruistic intention to become fully awakened Buddhas, not because we want to attain the highest spiritual levels or be known as somebody important or whatever, but simply so that we can alleviate pain of whatever sort, especially the pain, the unsatisfactory experience of just being in cyclic existence altogether. And so by developing our own mind, may we serve other living beings in that way. So we talked about visualizing Chenrezig and getting in touch with the feeling of compassion and then projecting that outwards as Chenrezig, and then taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha we talked about yesterday. And then the altruistic intention, which is also in that first verse, we've been discussing a little bit each session. So I thought to go into the four measurables today. In Tibetan sadhanas, the four measurables usually come after the verse of refuge and generating bodhicitta. But practicing the four immeasurables is something very helpful to do in order to benefit, in order to generate bodhicitta. Okay, so I think discussing them will kind of push us in that direction. The four immeasurables are taught also in the Theravada, the Pali tradition. I have a very good Dharma friend, very knowledgeable about Buddhism, But many years ago, we happened to be at an event with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and in the evening, other teachers were speaking, and one Theravada teacher gave a talk on the Four Immeasurables, and my friend said to me, I didn't realize they meditated on love and compassion, because so often the talk is, well, those people just want their own liberation, so they don't really care about others. And that kind of talk comes from encouraging people to generate bodhicitta and practice bodhicitta, but it's not accurate at all. Okay, and I was so surprised. I was surprised that my friend was surprised about this, because having lived in Singapore, I was very, I had become familiar with many different Buddhist traditions and how they practiced, and I saw that, the Four Immeasurables was kind of very strong in almost all the traditions. So the four are love, okay, which is the wish for sentient beings to have happiness in its causes. Compassion, the wish that they be free of suffering, or dukkha, unsatisfactory conditions and their causes. Joy, which is that they're never separated from the path and from the spiritual happiness and basically any kind of happiness that they can have. And then equanimity, which here means that there's no partiality among friends, enemies, strangers, and that we've overcome attachment to friends, anger or hatred to enemies, and apathy towards strangers. Sometimes these four immeasurables come in a different order, with equanimity first. So, for example, I know some of you have heard about the 7-point instruction for cultivating bodhicitta, and before you even start that, you meditate on equanimity, to even out the relationships. And then further along in the 7 points, then you come to love and compassion, but it's interesting, the more I kind of practice and the more I hear things, the more I realize how important equanimity is. And that if we lack that, so many things get really messed up in our lives and in our work. Somebody just gave us a book, something on empathy, kind of, what? Against empathy. So I haven't read it. Yeah. Has anybody read it? Yeah. And what's his reason for being against empathy?
The book talks about the difference between compassion and empathy,
Mm-hmm.
and how empathy can lead us to become kind of overwhelmed and not able to do something, not able to help, and that so encourages you to look at having compassion instead, so that you are still able to act and not become overwhelmed with emotion because of another's harming or hurting.
Okay. Yeah. Some people practice compassion and they get overwhelmed that way too. So that's something we'll talk about. But I was wondering if his argument was also based on if we have empathy for some people, then we side with those people against others. And then, our actions become quite partial. That was in the book too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the one versus the many is talked about as well.
Okay. Yeah, because I was wondering if it was about that. Because it's true, if we try and develop love and compassion or empathy, but we don't have equanimity towards everybody, then, we get so involved with some people's difficulties and become overwhelmed, or we just get so involved that we can only see one side of the story. We can't see everything that's going on with everybody, and how usually in bad situations, in one way you can look and there's a victim and a perpetrator, but another way of looking, everybody's a victim. And they're not a victim of each other, they're a victim of ignorance, anger, and attachment. Okay? And so, we come back again to the afflictions being the root of our misery. But, to try and develop some equanimity, even if it's not perfect, the more we can go in that direction, the freer our own mind is. And I think the more genuine and more sincere our wish to help becomes. And the less kind of confusion arises. So, in the equanimity meditation, which I'll go into first, what we're focusing on is attachment for some people, attachment being a mind that exaggerates or projects the good qualities of someone. In this case, we're talking about people. It could also be objects, but here we're talking about people. And then wanting to always be with them. Yeah. And that attachment leads to very close relationships. It can lead to a lot of possessiveness and jealousy as well. Okay. And a lot of expectations and demands. It's a downside of that kind of attachment. And then the anger or the hatred goes for other beings, that we dislike or disapprove of or whatever, and we want to harm them, even if it's by hoping their negative karma ripens quickly. So we, that again is partiality towards some beings, partiality against others, and then apathy towards everybody else. Just plain old not caring, usually because there's just too many strangers. And how can we care for them all? It's overwhelming. Okay. So what we're trying to counteract is the attachment, anger, and apathy. And in doing so, we start to examine how we categorize sentient beings into friend, enemy, and stranger. Okay. So I always like to do this little exercise with people. If you just close your eyes for a minute. Okay, so think of somebody that you are really fond of, admit that you have some attachment to them, somebody you don't want to be separated from, who you really value in your life. And imagine that person, or there may be a couple people, and just ask yourselves, why am I so attached to that person? There's no right or wrong answer. Just listen to what your mind says. Why do I have that strong feeling of, really wanting their happiness and not wanting to be separated from them? And then think of somebody that you actively are angry at or really hate. Imagine that person in front of you. And again, ask, why do I have so much anger and hatred towards that person? Again, there's no right or wrong answers. We're just investigating how our mind thinks. And then think of some strangers, maybe people at the grocery store or gas station or wherever, maybe your neighbors, and get in touch with that feeling of just apathy. And again, ask yourself, why? Why do I just, don't have much feeling for them one way or the other? So why are you attached to your friends? Because they like me. Mm. It's a good reason, yeah. Because they like me. Why else? I can always be myself around them, yeah. They won't judge me. Why else? Yeah, they boost my self-image, make me feel good about myself. They give reliable companionship. Yeah, they're loyal. And what about enemies? Why the anger, hatred towards them? They don't do what they say.
What I say.
Oh, they don't do what I say. Yeah. Yeah. Huh? They hurt me. Mm-hmm. They hurt other people, especially people I care about. Yeah. They don't put my needs first. Yeah, the whole world should do that. And what about strangers? Why the just apathy? Yeah. They don't affect me one way or the other.
We just haven't had the opportunity to place them through our judgmental filters.
Yeah. Yeah. They're blank slates. You can project anything. What else? Do you even see them as living beings with feelings? Yeah. We don't have time. Yeah. They're just kind of objects to navigate around as we go around about our lives. Yeah, we're so busy with the friends and enemies, we don't have any time or energy for the strangers. Yeah. Okay, so what word do you keep hearing in this discussion? Me. 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 Yeah. So this filter through which we judge everybody is the filter of how they affect me. Yeah. If they give me presents, agree with my values, do the kinds of things that I want, yeah, support me, praise me, yeah, then they're good people from their own side, inherently. It has nothing to do with me. I'm not biased. They have these good qualities by them inside themselves. Isn't that how we see them? Yeah? We're not biased. We just happen to meet these really fantastic people. Okay. Then the enemies. Again, they take our stuff or they don't respect it. They call us names. They disagree with our ideas. They criticize us and embarrass us and shame us and do everything we don't like. So from their side, inherently, they are bad, awful people. Again, I'm not bad. I'm not biased. Not biased at all. These people are just horrible people from their own side, objectively, right? Yeah. And the strangers, yeah, like we said, we don't have time, you know? There's just too many of them and they can get, our way. We just have to navigate around them. But actually with very little contact even, sometimes with no personal contact, just even hearing about them, then we can put them in the friend category, the enemy category. Yeah, we don't even have to know them. Okay. Yeah. So it's quite interesting because the whole framework for this is me. That's the lens through which we're seeing it all. Yeah? And we don't realize we're seeing it through the lens of me. We think these people are like that objectively. That's their nature. That's all they ever have been. That's all they ever will be. Yeah. But if that's really the case, how is it that at some time we love somebody very intensely? We thought they were wonderful. And then later, we don't want to have anything to do with them. If they were really 100% fantastic from their own side, how is it that we later can't stand them? Yeah, there's something not making so much sense here. You know, were they really 100% fantastic to start with? Maybe not. Yeah. Were they 100% awful to start with? And I just blinded myself? No. Yeah. They're a mixture of good qualities and bad qualities. Sounds normal, doesn't it? Sounds very human. And yet, we saw them in very one-sided ways and related to them in these one-sided ways as either all good or all bad. And what's even very interesting is to watch how they change categories. What does a friend have to do to then go into the enemy category? Yeah. And we've all had people we don't like who have become friends later. Yeah. So what do they have to do to move from the enemy to the friend category? It all centers on how they treat me, doesn't it? We think it's about their qualities, but it's not about their qualities. It's about their qualities in relationship to me. So somebody might be very hypercritical, but as long as they criticize other people and praise me, they're wonderful. Yeah. But as soon as that quality of being critical gets turned towards me, they stop being wonderful and they start being awful. But actually, you know, they still have that combination of good qualities and bad qualities like they had before. It just depends which one they're showing towards us right now. Quite interesting, isn't it? And that person that you thought was like just so disgusting, you meet them in another situation and you find out they're really nice. Because I traveled a lot, and especially, you know, in some countries where the culture is really different, where you don't know the language, yeah, it's nice to have a travel companion. And so you find yourself on a train or a bus with somebody and you start talking and, you know, they're a very nice person. But if you really look closely, probably if you met them in another situation, you wouldn't talk to them at all. You would think they're just, you know, somebody who's drinking and drugging, or somebody who's whatever, you know, whatever way you like to criticize others. If you met that same person in a different situation, it's like, I don't want to hang out with that person. But when you need a companion, when you're traveling, and they watch your stuff and you watch their stuff, and you help each other, then that person becomes very nice. Yeah? It's interesting, isn't it? And the person maybe that we can't stand, if they praise us or somebody we like, then they become good people. If they criticize the people we can't stand, then they also become good people. But if they criticize us or the people we like, then they become bad people, even though this quality of criticism is the same. Just depends who they're aiming it at. Okay? So we get into all sorts of tangled up things because of thinking in very purple and pink ways. Okay, very meat and tofu ways. Yeah, it's one or the other. It's not both. Okay, and so, we put people in different categories and we think that's who they are inherently from their side. And then we always treat them that way. And if we do that long enough, because everybody has faults and problems, then eventually everybody goes into the enemy side. And we become old and cynical and cranky and suspicious. Sounds like a delightful life, huh? Or sometimes to counteract that, we go to the other extreme and everybody's wonderful. So I just met you. You're welcome to come stay at my house. I'll trust you with anything. That doesn't usually work out so well. Okay. So what we're trying to get at here is a feeling of equanimity, in the sense that we have open-hearted care and concern about everybody, and we have an awareness that relationships change, sometimes on a dime. Can you have a person who you're madly in love with, and then they say the wrong thing and you hate them for a few hours? Yeah. And then you make up and then they go back in the friend category. And then you have another fight and they go back in the enemy category. Yeah. And you have some friends that you lost touch with who became strangers. And same thing with enemies that you lost touch with. They're now in the stranger category. You don't even think of them anymore. You're kind of neutral until you remember what they did to you, and then you hate them again. Okay? Doesn't matter whether what they did to you, how many years ago it was. But, they have one concrete, permanent phenomena. They never change. Yeah. So what they did to you 30 years ago, they will do to you again today at no provocation. Right? Okay. So are you getting some idea of how unreliable our mind is? Yeah? How unreliable we are. Because we get very attached and then we'll do anything for somebody. Or we get very upset and, that person's in the doghouse for as long as they live. And then everybody else we look at as objects just to navigate around without seeing them as real living beings who want happiness and not suffering. Okay. And so that, all that bias and partiality we have really leads to it leads to conflict. It leads to us being an emotional yo-yo. Yeah, according to how people treat us, up, down, up, down. Yeah, and it causes us to sometimes not be a very stable friend to those around us. Yeah. Because we're interpreting everything they say or do through the lens of me. Okay? So, what do we do about this? Yeah. I think, first of all, just realizing that we're filtering everything through this lens of me, just even realizing that automatically goes a long way to stopping, what my Lama Yeshe used to call the yo-yo mind. I like, I don't like, I like, I don't like. Just realizing that, how prey we are to being fooled, not even by others, but by ourselves. Yeah. So others may try and fool us, but we either accept it or don't accept it. So the ultimate judge of whether, or the ultimate gatekeeper of whether we've been fooled or not is ourselves. Yeah, not other people. Okay, so just having that thing of, okay, my mind feels really elated over somebody right now. Maybe I better just chill out a little bit. Okay. Right now, I feel really angry. But that same person in a different situation, I could feel entirely different about. And it changes very quickly. Yeah. They often give the example of, the person on this side of me gives me $1,000 today, and the person on that side of me criticizes me. So this one's a friend, and that one's an enemy. And then tomorrow, this person gives me $1,000, and that person criticizes me. So this one's my friend, and that one's an enemy. Okay, so in actual fact, they've both given me $1,000 and they've both criticized me. Yeah. So maybe in the big picture, it would be better just to have an equal concern, for all of them. Yeah. Not an equal apathy. Some people think, oh, I'm going to give up attachment and I'll give up anger. So I'm detached. I don't have any feelings towards anybody. I'm, an emotional log, an emotional piece of wood. Sometimes Shantideva says that when people bother you, become like a log, and we misinterpret it. I'm a log. Well, actually, I'm going to bump on a log. I don't care about anybody. You can go to hell if you want. You can go to heaven if you want. I don't care. Yeah, I have equanimity. No, that's not equanimity, okay? Because equanimity involves recognizing that sentient beings have feelings and they want happiness and they don't want misery. So we have an equal feeling in terms of the value of each sentient being. we want all of them to have happiness and freedom from misery equally. This is what we're heading towards, what our goal is. We're not going to get there by the end of the retreat, but maybe we can make some progress in that direction, okay? To go in that direction of open-hearted equal concern. But having open-hearted equal concern doesn't mean you relate to everybody in the same way. Okay? You relate to an adult differently than you relate to a toddler. And you give people different levels of trust according to how much trust they can bear, even though you have an equal care and concern about them. Okay? You usually would trust matches in adults' hands, but you wouldn't trust them in a toddler's hands. That doesn't mean that the toddler is corrupt and inept. They're a toddler. You don't give them matches. Okay? It doesn't mean that, like I said, that you treat everybody equally. Yeah. If you ask me to pilot a plane for you, that would not be very smart. Yeah. You care equally about me and the pilot, but let the pilot fly the plane. It's much better to trust them with the navigation than to trust me. I wouldn't know what even to do. Do planes even have buttons or keys to turn them on and off? I have no idea. Yeah, does anybody know? I've always wondered that. Huh? There's a switch. That's how you turn the plane on and off. Okay. But there's many switches. Okay. So, we're trying to balance our mind. If we can, or put it this way, the more we can balance our mind, the more we can gradually move towards equanimity, the less emotional ups and downs we have. Yeah. We won't have so many exaggerated, unrealistic expectations of people. So we won't experience so much disappointment when they don't meet our expectations. Okay. We won't have so many hard and fixed ideas about how terrible people are. So we open ourselves up to making more friends and enjoying other people's company. So Ken turned us onto this book called Strangers in Our Own Land. And it's written by a Berkeley sociologist who wanted to understand Trump supporters and went to Louisiana and lived there for 5 years, I think, and really made friends with those people. And it's so interesting reading how they think and how they value, what their values are. And it makes them very human instead of, putting them in one block, which we give various names to. Or if you're a Trump supporter, it'd be nice if somebody wrote a similar book, about the Berkeley liberals, and and why they think the way they think, because it really humanizes things, and you can begin to understand how people look at life and why they make the decisions that they make. And I find this book quite interesting because in looking at how other people look at things and how they were raised from their background to look at certain things. It acts as a mirror for me to see how I was raised and what the values I grew up with were. Yeah. And to begin to see that from their viewpoint, you know, in many ways, the way they think makes complete sense to them. Yeah. So this is the kind of thing that not only does our country need as a whole, but we as sentient beings need, you know, just as inhabitants of this universe, because our tendency to judge based on very little information is high. Yeah. Okay. So we can see that, you know, when we don't have this equal feeling, it's going to be difficult for us to be a benefit to others. We'll only be able to benefit the people that we like. And sometimes not even them. They don't want to hear from us. Because we have all sorts of good advice for our family, don't we? Yeah. And for your friends, all sorts of good advice. But they don't want to hear from us. Yeah. So our enemies don't want to hear our advice. Our friends don't want to hear our advice. Yeah. Strangers, they don't care about it. So we talk to our dogs and cats. And birds and chipmunks, and you know, they're the only ones who will listen to us rant and rave with all our wonderful advice about how everybody should change. And even our cats, they don't listen to us. Yeah, we tell them not to chase gophers and not to catch birds. They ignore us too, but they're so cute that we forgive them. Yeah. But human beings who are adults, when they ignore our advice, we don't look at them as cute and forgive them. We look at them as, you know, hardened, you know, with all, you know, hardened bigots. Yeah. Yeah. So bigot now means anybody who doesn't agree with whatever I believe. Okay. So if I'm a vegetarian and you're a meat eater, you are a bigot. Okay. You're partial. Okay. So you can see how it inhibits generating bodhicitta, how it inhibits people trusting us, because we're really not so trustworthy, are we? Yeah, smallest thing, we get offended and like, we turn against somebody. Okay. So again, I'm not saying that we act the same way with everybody, and I'm not saying that we trust everybody equally. Yeah, we may have trusted someone, and then they broke our trust. So then afterwards, you know, we may be a little bit more cautious as we get to know them better and see to what level we can trust them. Because everybody has different areas that in which they're trustworthy and areas in which maybe because they don't even have, they just lack the knowledge, not because they're ill-intentioned, where they're not trustworthy. Okay, so I'm not trustworthy to drive, you know, to fly a plane, but that's not because, you know, I want to, you know, help you crash. Okay, so it is with other living beings too. Okay, so just, you know, being able to us, you know, approach that what His Holiness does is he approaches everybody as a friend. Yeah. And he interacts with everybody as a friend. But he also relates to different people differently according to how they act and what they believe and so on. Okay? So that's kind of where we want to go. Can you see the benefits of this? Yeah. That it doesn't mean you become cold-hearted and detached, doesn't mean that. We're still involved with people, but we've lessened the stickiness in some relationships, and we've lessened the get them out of here in other relationships.
So what you just said resonates with me in the work that I'm doing with the Boy Scouts, because I am kind of in the belly of the beast, working with people from all different places in their mind, and I think many of the people that I am working with, have different values,
Mm-hmm.
and when it comes down to it, we have this, a scout is trustworthy, loyal, all of these wonderful things, but we come at it from different places.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been fascinating to me to see that and to experience kind of opening up and sharing some love with people that might not get that from this end.
Yeah. Right. So instead of just seeing a few things and putting somebody in a box, kind of saying, tell me about how you view the world. Yeah. So some years ago, my teacher had what he called an Enlightenment experience celebration in India, and had many, hundreds of his disciples came. And it was for 3 months, and I gave myself the job of talking to each one of the Sangha members, having a good conversation with each person at some time. There may be, I don't know, over 100 Sangha members and hundreds of, kind of other students. And it was a very good thing for me, because some people I just would naturally just kind of ignore. I don't like the way they look, or the way they asked a question, or we judge people on all sorts of stupid, silly things. But I really gave myself that assignment to have a good discussion with everybody and find something of mutual interest to talk about with everybody. And it was really a wonderful experience that way. And yeah, very eye-opening. So she is working with girls who are becoming Boy Scouts. The Boy Scouts is now opening to girls.
I'm not sure that I really know this from personal experience, but I have heard from others that when you really are working on equanimity,
When you speak a little louder.
okay, sorry, it's the allergy voice.
Okay.
When you're really working on equanimity, and the highs and the lows start to even out,
Yeah.
that there's a feeling that I'm not really engaged anymore. I'm not really alive anymore. I'm not, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I have heard that, and so I'm interested in your comments.
Yeah. I remember somebody asking His Holiness about that, and he said, well, the highs may not be as high and the lows may not be as low, but I don't mind that. Because, being so attached to our emotions, I feel so high and I feel so low, it really accentuates the sense of self as the center of the universe. Yeah? So evening that out a little bit also affects our sense of who we are, because we don't get so engaged with, and, you know? So you're still emotionally alive, because what getting rid of the attachment and aversion does is it opens the space to have love and compassion. Yeah, because love and compassion are very different from attachment. Okay? So, Buddhas very much have an emotional life, but they don't go up and down like yo-yos like we do. Are there some people that whenever you meet them, you're not quite sure what you're going to get? Because, 1 minute they're happy, the next minute they're upset. So, you may see them on different days and you're not quite sure what mood they're in, and so how to treat them. Yeah.
Walking on eggshells.
Yeah. So we often walk on eggshells. Yeah. Did we ever consider that for other people we may be like that? Yeah. That we're not so even tempered, and that other people, they're not quite sure. Are they going to get a smiley face or a grouchy one when they see us in the morning? Huh? It's interesting to flip all these situations, how we look at others. How do I appear to others? Okay, so that's equanimity. On that basis, then we generate love, wanting sentient beings to have happiness as causes, and compassion, wanting them to be free of suffering and its causes. And so to generate love and compassion, we definitely have to do something about our anger. Our attachment also, but especially our anger. Because when anger flares, there's no way to have love and compassion in our mind at that same time. Okay. In addition, anger destroys our merit. So we may be doing all sorts of practices, trying to, be generous, keep ethical conduct, and so on. But when we get angry, it's like throwing acid on our virtue. It just fizzles it. And you can feel that in your mind. When you're really practicing and trying to create virtue, you can feel a shift in your mind, and there's a feeling of more contentment. And then you get mad at somebody, and then you feel the difference between that angry mind and that mind when you've created virtue. And they're so different. And then you can understand, oh, that's why anger destroys virtue. Yeah. So anger and attachment are related. The more attached we are to something or someone, the more angry, or the angrier we get when our relationship with it is interrupted or goes south. Okay? So dealing with our anger means also dealing with our attachment. Mm-hmm. So we were talking about buttons before. Yeah. And Mary Grace was telling me in her interview yesterday about one group you were training that she does, where they talk about buttons where you actually have you draw your button on a big red piece of paper, and you stick your, yeah? And you stick your buttons all over you, you know? And we usually associate buttons with things we get upset about. Somebody pushed my buttons. But why are those things buttons? They're because we have attachment somewhere in there lurking around. Yeah. And because we don't recognize the attachment or the unrealistic expectations, then when the expectations don't get met, we say, they're pushing my buttons. Okay? But the buttons are things where we have some clinging. Yeah, we have some clinging. So this happens to me. Yeah, I'm getting on a plane and somebody says, "May I have your ticket, sir?" Or, "What would you like to drink, sir?" Or being in the women's bathroom and somebody coming in and going, thinking I'm a man. Now, I could be very sensitive about that, because I told you the story about growing my hair long because when I was a little kid and I had my ducktail, didn't I tell that story here?
Not here.
Oh, but I told it recently, but not here. Okay, then, so when I was very little, I mean like this big, that they used to cut the girls' hair into ducktails. Do you remember? It was short and then a little piece in the back. Okay, some of you my age remember. So I was walking down the street one day with my mom, holding my mom's hand because I was like this big, and one man walks by and puts his hand on my head and says, "Hi, Sonny." I'm not Sonny. I'm a girl. What are you calling me "Hi, Sonny" for? So that happened way back when. So I could have a big button about that, so that every time somebody on the airline says, "What would you like to drink, sir?" Or, "Here's your tickets," so that I would get just infuriated. Yeah. So I have a choice there. I could choose to be offended, or I could choose to see it as nothing, which is basically what it is. It's nothing. Okay? So if we deal with our buttons, then other people can do what they want. We don't get upset. Okay, but we have to deal with what our buttons are. So that's just a silly little example. Yeah. I also, but it just shows how we can choose to get offended over anything. Yeah. I was sitting in the airport one time, and one person comes walking up to me with a big smile on her face. And I'm thinking, oh, I must have met this person before. She looks like she knows me, but I'm not very good at remembering faces and names and stuff. And I'm thinking, who is it? And she walks up and leans over and says, "It's Jesus." Yeah. Yeah. And then every once in a while, and this has happened repeatedly, when I'm getting on a plane, a very soft hand on my shoulder and a woman leaning over and saying, don't worry, dear, when the chemo stops, your hair will come back. You know, so sweet. But it's like, it doesn't apply to me. Thank goodness. Yeah. But so, you just kind of get used to this kind of thing, and then it becomes nothing unless you choose to become offended. Yeah. So, so it's like this with many things. You know? And when I was saying before, especially with families, our family members know how to push our buttons, and we know how to push them. So it's very good. Look at what our buttons are with our families. Yeah. And then ask ourselves, what am I hanging on to here? And sometimes what we're hanging on to is an idea of how people should treat us, an idea of what a family is, an idea of how siblings should relate to each other, an idea of who we are now. We're no longer 5 years old. Yeah. And to watch, what are we hanging on to with these people? Because those are our buttons, and that's where we get upset. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'll leave you with that. Yeah. Because it's very good, inner kind of observation, yeah, to look at. Because, for example, loyalty. Yeah, loyalty, one kind of loyalty is really quite virtuous. We're stable, we're reliable, we're dependable, we're not up and down yo-yos. Another kind of loyalty is not very healthy. It's a loyalty that's mixed in with obligation and fear. Okay? Fear that if I don't please somebody, they will push me outside of the group. Or strange ideas of loyalty, even this person is doing something illegal and harmful, they're still my whatever it is, and therefore I should get involved in helping them. But helping them do something illegal is not helping them. Okay? Helping them stop doing something illegal is helping them. Okay? But so we have, sometimes we're not very clear in our own mind about what loyalty means. Yeah, a lot of the guys I work with in prison, especially the ones who are either gang members or have been or hang around the fringe of gangs, it's, my homies, right or wrong. Because if I don't stay with this group of people, then the other people are going to get me. Yeah, one guy told me how hard it was for him to get out of the gang he was in. It took him great courage, actually, to do it, but he did it. And another one told me that he didn't belong to a gang, but he had to side with his own ethnic racial group, or else he would get harmed. So, to look at what loyalty means to us. Which kind of loyalty do we have towards others? Yeah, the kind that's really good, or the kind that is kind of messy. Okay, and there we see, either virtue or we see attachment. and confusion. Yeah, because when we have the messy kind of loyalty, there's confusion in our mind about, how to relate to somebody, what is really important. Okay? So a lot of our Dharma practice is thinking deeply about these kinds of things and gaining some kind of clarity in our own mind. Because when there's clarity, then we don't have to react so much to how people treat us. And we can also make good decisions about how to relate to different people at different times.